need to be. Let us welcome into the Newsmax studios here in New York City our guest. He is the founder and CEO of Global Security Group, Inc., former DEA, firearms and homeland security expert. David Katz joins us. David, it's a short notice, but thank you so much for coming in today.
Glad to be here.
It is exactly what I think is on the tip of the tongue of everybody today, more than just the memorials themselves, but as we watch and see those horrific pictures from a year ago, are we safer?
Well, certainly they're safer today in Boston. I mean, the memory of the event is not receded yet to where people forget. I would argue that the further away we go from an event like that, the less safe we become. People get inured to the fact nothing's happened in recent memory, and people lay down their guard. But right now, I can tell you they're real sharp in Boston after 1 year after the attack, for sure.
Certainly Boston learned a lot of the mistakes, but what about the nation? Because I always still hearken back, again, we go back to 9/11. New York thought they were safe. Yep. Boston thought they were safe. There are other cities in America. There is still Chicago, Washington, D.C., so many other places. Are we, as a nation, safer today?
Well, we don't have the cultural experience that places, let's say Israel, have, where every citizen takes upon himself or herself the security of their neighbor. For example, in Boston, those bags were just sat out in a crowd and no one paid them any mind. In Israel, if a bag is left unattended for a second, they don't wait to call law enforcement. Somebody's instantly saying, whose bag is that? Is that anyone's? And they're backing away, get to cover, because it's more of a cultural thing as a result of horrific acts of terrorism that they've experienced. We haven't, thank God, had that, but we need to get a little more close to that, where average citizens, if they see something that's out of place or suspicious, they're the ones who sound the alarm, because otherwise we're going to have more and more events like this, and there's really no way to stop them.
Are people really doing that now? I mean, we always hear that. You see something, say something, write something. Now they're telling people, take pictures with your phones, send it on. Is there a sense that people are actually doing that, or do they still kind of go, well, I don't want to get involved?
I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, there are some people who do. I mean, but they do experiments all the time, and they'll leave a bag, a red bag, practically with an X on it in a public place, and people just walk past it and say nothing. And then you have other people who are a little more conscious and aware. I know first thing I do when I step on a train or subway, I take a quick glance around. And it's just, it's an industry I'm in, it's my background in law enforcement. But I think more and more people need to do that. And I think the law enforcement community has to be very receptive when people bring these things to their attention.
We're finding out now a lot more about what we knew, what we didn't know, and what was shared. It still seems to me that there's two things that still bother me about Boston to this day. First of all is that sharing of information, the proprietary nature between the various governmental agencies. We know, we don't share, maybe we should share. I get the sense from friends of mine in Washington, D.C., and some friends in the security community that it still goes on, that it still is not a good sharing atmosphere. What's the truth?
Well, to some extent it still does go on. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule. I know the DEA has an incredible intelligence sharing operation. Actually, my former partner runs it, and he makes sure there is 100% sharing. But there are agencies who keep things to themselves, and they do sometimes, I think they delude themselves that it's for a national security interest, but sometimes withholding information leads to tragic results, and I think we've seen that. We saw that in 9/11, the bridge between the FBI and CIA, which by the way was legislated. I think there's a cultural reason that information is not shared, and in this case there was a legislative one.
How do we stall that? You said deluding themselves. So how do we get past that? Into deluding themselves that they think, oh, I don't have to share. That seems to be impossible.
Well, I think there needs to be at the top, above the FBI, above DEA, above all the federal agencies. For example, in DEA they have what's called a desk for certain narcotics investigations, and that person or those persons are the ones who gather and collate information and decide, hey, you know what? This agency is working on this target, and this sounds pretty similar. Let's put them together. So, the whole terrorism czar idea was, was kind of the answer to it. But again, you're dealing with people. You're dealing with human prejudices, human likes and dislikes. We like working with them. We don't like working with them. It's a very, very difficult. When I worked with the Israeli police in the past in my former career, they didn't understand that. They didn't understand how DEA and FBI could be working the same guy and kind of like, well, not sharing 100%. They didn't get it. Well, I think we need to do better, and so far no one's come up with the antidote.
When it comes to sharing, though, isn't it fair to say, and I've heard this report today as well, that to this day, here's the second part of my still can't believe that we're still here. The Russians, we now found out, certainly didn't share everything with us. Possibly they were worried about their own security mechanisms. They didn't want to give away some of their own internal investigations. But we are still hamstrung in many ways, are we not, by dealing with international terrorists, knowing that we can't find out everything, no matter how deep we dig, because there's going to be a Russian government, a Chinese government involved, a Malaysian government involved, who sometimes don't seem to know what they're doing half the time. We have to rely on these people.
Yeah, well, we don't have access to exactly what data the Russians transferred or gave to the FBI. And presumably, just like we don't give everything, we'll give information that we think is actionable. We may not decide, okay, we're going to say exactly what are our sources, what are our collection methods. So I get that. On the other hand, when a foreign government contacts you and says, look, we have information on one of your citizens, and we believe he came to our country, he trained with terrorists, he has contacts with terror groups, his family has contacts with terror groups, keep an eye on him. What I don't understand is the investigative process. If someone tells you that, why do you conduct an interview and finish it by interviewing the guy? I mean, presumably there's some reason they have institutionally, but it would be the same analogy if someone gave me an information as a DEA agent and said this person is moving 1,000 kilos of cocaine every month. I'm not going to interview the guy, even if I don't have enough to act on for the time being. There's going to be an intelligence report filed. There's going to be some background investigation done, and if you're not successful, for the future, there's at least a record of it, and you've not spoken to the person to alert them. Hey, the law enforcement knows something about me. In this case, they actually went and talked to the guy, and then they cleared the case. And listen, I don't know what they knew. I hate the Monday morning quarterback, but that seems like the wrong investigative strategy.
Then who needs to be setting the tone here? I mean, we have so many governmental agencies that are working here: Homeland Security, FBI, CIA, DEA, private security firms, whatever. Who needs to be at the top and setting the tone and saying, this is the way it's done, listen?
Well, it's the chief executive. It's the president and the attorney general, because ultimately they are the chief law enforcement officers.
And are they doing enough? That's what the American public seriously wants to know. Are they doing enough, and are they leading as they should?
You know, the problem is, unless you have experts in the field in positions of authority, they're not really going to be equipped to make this decision, to lead, if you will. For example, if you would suspect that to put someone in charge of the DEA or the FBI, they shouldn't merely be a good administrator. They should be the sharpest tool in the investigative.
A great investigator.
Absolutely. And of course have the administrative skills as well. People who've made cases, who understand all the intricacies, all the difficulties, what you can and cannot do. Those people should be promoted to positions of authority instead of, in many, many cases, political appointees they may be nice people, I don't know, but they're not equipped for that job. And especially in the post 9/11 world, we need people who are the absolute best and brightest we have. Otherwise, nothing's going to change.
That's a good point, too, because when you're always looking for that best, are we finding them, and are we at least attracting them? Because there are some reports and stories I've read that say, we're just not getting the smart people anymore to sit there and grow from the ranks in our intelligence agencies here in America.
I don't think so. Listen, in my career, I've known people who were extraordinarily talented. And by the way, there are people who are the opposite. You have a bell curve in anything you do. Sure. You have on one end of the scale, you have extraordinarily talented, motivated people, and on the other end, you have people who are they look at this as a civil service position. There are people in the ranks who are capable, who are experienced, and could lead, but they're not moved up because they're not politically connected. Because if you are a president, or you're a governor, or you're somebody who has a political appointee power, who are you going to put in? You're going to put in your friends, your supporters. You're not generally going to look in, okay, tell me who are the top 10 agents in the FBI? Who are the best guys? Not the guys who are the best at politicking, advancing their career. Who's the smartest guy we have? Who's our #1 agent? Let's put that guy in charge. That's never happened.
How badly hamstrung are a lot of the agencies here by governmental rules and regulations? Not to say that we should just let everybody do whatever they want, but there certainly are some very tough rules and regulations about spying, about gathering, about data. So how hamstrung are we?
Well, we do have a constitution in this country, and I am not one of these people
exactly.
who say,
stay within the Constitution, right. But still there is some that it's hamstrung us past that.
Yeah, but there are enough. I mean, it's been my experience that you can do everything in a constitutionally permitted manner and still get everything you need to know to accomplish. There are mechanisms in place where if you had an emergency, you could take action and get a post-action review by the judiciary. So there are mechanisms in place. I'm not one of these people who want to go back to the King George days.
Ways of doing
no,
things.
it's not, because ultimately, and you know, speaking, you know, now I'm on the other side of the law enforcement fence, and you look back and say, you know what, there are abuses. There are people who violate constitutional protections, and we need that in place. Because if I'm an agent and I'm well-meaning, I have the best intentions, but I don't have a set of parameters that I have to follow, well, you know, I can sometimes stray far afield, and then, you know, then our rights as a country, our natural rights, are degraded. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have an effective law enforcement response within the Constitution, and I think there are ample ways to do that.
Do you have any doubt in your mind whatsoever that as we sit here today on the one-year anniversary, and we have pictures behind us of World Trade Center and what's gone on there, that right now as we sit at this moment, there are dozens of plots that are moving forward, and that lives are at risk, and that American cities are still dead in the bullseye of terrorists?
There's no doubt whatsoever. There's no doubt, and people who think otherwise are fooling themselves. You know, it takes a tragic event to get people back on, well, you know what, we are at risk. But yeah, absolutely, you're correct.
With regard to that then, what needs to be done in your opinion? What are the first couple of things that we need to do? We can't stop it sometimes, but to at least try and slow it down, that we're not doing.
Yeah, well, I think the sharing is one aspect that's very important. It has gotten better, but it could always improve. And like I said, I think there needs to be the oversight by truly talented people, because there are people that it would surprise you. And I speak of people that I know personally who live and they breathe the job. It's not, I mean, it would stun you, their patriotism, their ability. It absolutely would stun. And again, there are people who are not like that. There are people whose thought is, well, where am I landing next? Once I retire, am I going to get a job in this firm or that firm? There are people who live and breathe the job, and if we can get those people into positions where they can make a difference, I think that would be an enormous help. I believe that with all my heart.
I can only hope that what you're saying gets through to some people, because having a lot of people in law enforcement, certainly not at your level, but a lot of people that I know, they just wish they had some help sometime. And they wish they were able to do certain things.
I was just a journeyman. I mean, I was just, a regular street guy. I mean, but there are guys who I'm talking about bosses now, who had great street careers, who are now they're in higher positions, who we need to get them in charge. They need to sit at the table with the President and Attorney General.
David Katz, an absolute pleasure, my friend. Please,
It's mine.
you and your group, keep us safe.
Thank you.
It is what we are doing right now, remembering what happened 1 year ago in Boston, the marathon bombing, the people in Boston right now. It is an emotional time, but it's worth revisiting. We're back.
We don't just talk about the news, we talk to those making news. This is the Steve Malzberg.
Tonight.